Chapter 788 Amora's Might 2. Go ahead. I averted my eyes from the prince-ranked demon and took a few steps to the side. He's all yours. When I saw Brutus swallow his pride and ask me for a chance to fight, despite the fact that I wanted to participate in the action, I decided to take a step back instead. Because of the nature of our partnership, I didn't want to put unnecessary strain on our alliance over something like this. In addition, I was aware that orcs had their own sense of pride, and I imagined that he must still be resentful toward the prince for what he had done just a few moments earlier when he had ambushed him. They were very proud of their power and had a deep-seated hatred for those who plotted or engaged in underhanded practices. Cough. I suddenly felt like coughing. Not sure why. Thank you. Brutus gave me a single nod of his head, and then quickly turned his attention back to Prince Kuzma, who was standing above us. His calf muscles contracted, as did the muscles on his upper body, and like a bullet, his figure shot through the air and materialized next to the prince-ranked demon. Swish. A whistling sound swept through the air, and a pressurized wind force swept through the area beneath. My clothes flapped and my hair became a mess. Bome. His fist came hurtling toward Prince Kuzma, who had long since forgotten his presence, and the two of them began to clash in the air above me. I don't think there will be any problems from here on out. Seeing how the situation was, I turned my gaze away from them and shifted my attention toward the dozen or so demons that were surrounding me. I smiled at them. Hi, I dash. Attack him together. Swoosh. Swoosh. I didn't even get a chance to finish my sentence before they all pounced on me together. My brows furrowed and time slowed down at that moment. 1, 2, 3, 12? I made a mental tally of each and every one of the demons that were coming closer to me. They all seemed to be in the Duke rank, although some of them were on the weaker side, and they were all reaching out with their claws for me. Even so, they were not a threat in my eyes, as their figures moved at a snail's pace within my vision. Suddenly, a thought popped into my head, and as I continued to look at them, I scrunched up my eyes. Should I just kill them? That'd be the most logical answer, but I think sparing them can have its use. There were a lot of things I could do with their cores, and I was also short on manpower back in Amora. This was a perfect opportunity for me to find some new workers. They could be great additions if tamed properly. I guess the decision is made. Making up my mind rather quickly, I placed my hand against the sheath of the sword. A white film covered my palm, allowing it to move through the slowed-down space at the same speed at which my brain was processing things, and I positioned my thumb directly beneath the hilt. I quickly scanned the demons that were in front of me and measured the angles at which they were coming from before slightly increasing the amount of pressure that was being applied by my thumb over the hilt of my sword. Click. A familiar clicking sound echoed within my head as time returned to normal and over a dozen heads came rolling on the ground in front of me. Thump, thump, thump. Did I overdo it? I had to squint my eyes a couple of times to get used to the scene that was in front of me. Although I had seen my fair share of gore, what lay before my eyes was still not pleasing to the eye. Let's get this over with. Trying my best to keep myself composed, I moved toward their bodies and collected all of their cores. That should be all of them. The procedure was completed in a relatively short amount of time, and once I had collected all 12 of them, the demons disintegrated into dust and I inserted the cores into my bracelet. That's that done. I patted my hand in satisfaction. With them gone, a major force of the demons was gone, and what was left were merely the leftovers. The sudden cracking sound was a testament to my thoughts. When I turned my head to look in the direction from which the sound was coming from, I noticed that a large crack had formed on the barrier that was surrounding the entire city. It's starting. Its size grew by the second, and within a couple of seconds, the entire barrier shattered like glass. Fragments of the barrier fell from above and crashed against the ground beneath. Crash. Attack. Attack. Kill as many demons as you can. As the orcs charged headlong into the city with all of their strength, their deafening shrieks reverberated through the air like thunder. Akik. Arg. Plague. As the two opposing forces collided with one another, sparks erupted into the air and dark blood splattered into the air. Good. It looks like my investment in Amora wasn't for nothing. If there was one thing that stood out as a significant disadvantage for orcs, it would have to be the fact that they did not make use of mana. In spite of the fact that their use of aura gave them a distinct advantage over the other races in terms of their physical prowess, One of the most significant drawbacks of their use of aura was the fact that it was a rather uncommon source of power in a universe that was predominantly made up of mana. Keeping this in mind, I turned my attention to the rotting remains of the orcs that were scattered across the ground. If not for the lack of aura on Earth, the orcs wouldn't be in the state that they are now. The only reason the orcs were in a situation where they requested backup was because they lacked aura. Orcs, in contrast to the other races, stopped progressing the moment they arrived on Earth. As a direct consequence of this, a great deal of their forces were now noticeably weaker than they had been in the past. This was in stark contrast to the other races which were able to grow in the time they spent on Earth. Since we were now allies, I wanted the best for them since we were soon going to be fighting against Jezebeth. I didn't want to see them in such a state. It was a pity, but there was nothing I could do about the situation. At least that was what I thought in the past. Looks like I'll soon have to reveal to the orcs about Amora. There was no way I'd be able to explain the sudden appearance of Silig and the others without telling them about Amora. In fact, they probably already knew about the planet but were rather clueless about its current state. That's that. Patting my hands once more, I stretched my back and shifted my attention toward the city walls in the distance. Let's end this as quickly as possible. Casting a quick glance in Brutus's and Prince Kuzma's direction, I made my way toward the city. As they were fighting among themselves, I made the decision to take advantage of the situation and eliminate as many demons as possible. While I didn't really care about the lives of the orcs that belonged to Brutus, I did care for the ones that belonged to Amora. It took a lot of resources to nurture just a single one of them, and I didn't want my investment to go down the drain like that. Now. I licked my lips. Who should I kill first? We've looted everything. There's nothing left in the treasury. Got it. Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. Ryan's fingers danced across his keyboard. Lazily leaning his back against one of the pillars of the treasury, he sorted out all of the inventory that they had just received and divided them into many categories. He'd normally be fine with this type of job since it was a lot easier than what he usually did, but when taking into account that the sheer number of items that came from the treasury numbered in the 5 digits, Ryan's already large dark circles started to expand and the energy drained from out of his body. I hate my job. Listen to yourself. If someone passed by, they'd think you were a middle-aged man in your midlife crisis. A rough voice commented, and Leopold soon appeared in front of Ryan. He had a beer in his hand and his expression seemed rather relaxed. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who's handling all of these boring tasks. I'm not talented in that regard. Ugh. Ryan ruffled his hair. He had previously been very proud of his smarts, but ever since meeting Ren he started to believe that his genius was more of a curse than a blessing. It seemed like to him talent equaled greater workload. It's all right, Ryan. Ryan felt a hand press against his shoulder. When he turned around he found Hein staring at him with a friendly smile. Don't beat yourself too much. I, out of all people, know just how much you're struggling and I feel your pain. Hein. Ryan felt tears build up in the corner of his eyes. Out of all people he hadn't expected Hein to sympathize with him. He felt touched. Don't worry about a thing. Hein patted him once more. His subsequent words, however, prompted Ryan's smile to freeze, and all the previous goodwill he felt for him disappeared into thin air. Rin just told me that there's going to be more treasure to loot in another city, so there's no time to rest. Let's get to work. You foo. Chapter 789 Amora's Might 3. Brutus and Prince Kuzma stood facing each other, their eyes locked in a deadly stare. The air around them crackled with tension as the two of them prepared to engage in battle. Brutus gripped his massive battle axe tightly, feeling the weight of it in his hand as he eyed the demon warily. He had thankfully managed to recover his axe moments prior, and without it things would have been extremely difficult for him. Fwop. The prince spread its wings wide, revealing its imposing height and lanky build. Its eyes glinted with an eerie light, and its lips twisted into a wicked grin. I have to admit I severely underestimated you, Brutus. Prince Kuzma sneered. But that's still far from enough. You'd be delusional if you thought that my city would fall to the likes of you orcs. Brutus said nothing, but he felt a surge of anger rising within him. He was already aware of how insidious and scummy demons were, but having experienced them firsthand he could barely keep his emotions in check. He knew that the battle ahead would be a difficult one, but he was determined to let him pay the price of trampling all over his honor. Without warning, the orc charged forward with a fearsome roar, his axe held high above his head. Prince Kuzma watched him approach with a look of amusement on his face. Don't think that because I previously didn't fight you head-on that I'm weaker than you. Like, a pressurized wind gale formed from the point of contact between the two powerful beings as they fought each other in a fierce battle that resulted in a shower of sparks and a thunderous clash of their weapons. The loud sound of their clashes was heard all across the land. Boom! Staggering back a few steps, Brutus felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through his veins. Swoosh! He swung his axe with all his might, but Prince Kuzma was too quick, dodging the blow and counterattacking with a flurry of claws that were as hard as his axe. Clank! Uck! Brutus barely managed to block the demon's strikes with his arms, which creaked under the force of the onslaught. I noticed this before, but your skin is a lot tougher than I thought. Prince Kuzma taunted, his voice dripping with contempt. Brutus gritted his teeth, his jaw clenching in anger. He growled. You talk too much. Clank. He swung his axe down and sparks flew in the air. Clank. As the battle raged on, the two exchanged blows with savage intensity. Their weapons clashed and rang out, sending showers of sparks flying in all directions. Arg! Brutus swung his axe again, this time aiming for the prince's midsection. The prince was able to evade the blow, but not before Brutus managed to graze his arm. Auk! The prince roared in pain, his black blood spilling onto the ground. Touching the ground, the land where his blood fell melted. Why, you! Enraged, Prince Kuzma unleashed a powerful blast of demonic energy. The attack was swift and powerful, sending Brutus flying across the battlefield. Boom! Brutus crashed to the ground, his armor dented and his bones ached. As he struggled to stand up, Prince Kuzma approached him, his eyes blazing with fury. He snarled. You should have stayed down when you had the chance, Brutus. Brutus rose to his feet, clutching his battle axe tightly. Again. He growled. You talk too much. The demon laughed in a cold and chilling manner. So be it. Clank. And so the battle continued, with Brutus and Prince Kuzma locked in a deadly struggle that seemed to go on forever. But just as the situation between the two of them appeared to be steadily heading toward a stalemate, a sudden cracking sound echoed from the distance, and the two of them came to a halt for a brief moment. Prince Kuzma's expression quickly fell and Brutus's brightened. See, crack. On the barrier that surrounded the city, cracks had begun to appear and were gradually growing wider with each passing second, intertwining with each other like the thin threads of a spiderweb. As tens of thousands upon tens of thousands of orcs lined up outside the barrier with their shields and weapons drawn, the demons that stood behind the barrier revealed terrified expressions. Karam! Their war cries reverberated throughout the land, and a formidable power erupted from within their own bodies. Crack! Another crack formed on the barrier, and the expression of the demons grew worse. Brutus took his gaze away from the barrier and looked back at Prince Kuzma, who seemed to be distracted at the moment. He didn't miss his chance. Keep your eyes on the battle. Swoosh. His axe was hurled in the prince's way, and it wasn't until the axe was only a few centimeters away from him that Prince Kuzma realized the demon's precarious situation. In his panic he turned around and brought his wings in front of him. Boom! The force of the impact hurled his body toward the ground, where it slammed into the surface and created a sizable crater. Boom! Brutus was quick to follow up with his attack as his feet came crashing against the ground, and he ran toward where Prince Kuzma had crashed into. The ground shook with each one of his steps, and when he finally materialized in front of the bewildered prince, he raised his axe once more and slashed down at him. Swoosh! The air tore itself apart and twisted itself around the axe, which shone with a dark green color. The sheer force that was applied to the axe was unlike anything else, and at the same time, Prince Kuzma's expression changed drastically, and demonic energy erupted out of his body and covered every inch of it. But it was too late. Boom! As the axe came crashing to the ground, a cacophony of cracking sounds resounded throughout the room. Brutus didn't need to see it to know what had just happened as Prince Kuzma's body flattened to the ground. Be it his wings, his legs, or his arms, they were all broken, and like a broken toy, Prince Kuzma lay on the ground with all of his limbs facing different directions. He heaved a heavy breath of air as a thin layer of demonic energy encircled his body and began to slowly heal his wounds, However, it was already far too late for him. Rumble. After taking only one step, Brutus reached the prince and was able to look down on him. Before the Prince of Kuzma saw him raise his axe once more, the icy look that he gave him left a profound impression on his mind. And, no. He tried to struggle but couldn't. It was far too late. Swoosh. The axe came crashing down, and just as it was about to land directly over his core and kill him instantly, a thin hand emerged from beneath the axe. Smack. With a loud smack, the hand grabbed the axe and pulled it away from the prince's body. Brutus' eyes widened as the axe came to an abrupt halt, and he looked down at it. As did Prince Kuzma, who stared in disbelief at the individual who had just intervened. "What are you doing?" Brutus growled, staring at Rin, who had just appeared from out of nowhere and interfered with his battle. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't angry at the moment. In fact, he was furious, but thinking about how he had conceded moments prior, he managed to keep his anger in check. "Wait a moment." Rin spoke, his hand letting go of the axe. As soon as he let go of his axe, he looked down at the palm of his hand, which had reddened considerably for a few seconds before turning his attention back to Brutus. "Can you do me a favor and spare him?" "Spare him?" Brutus's expression didn't change, but the land around him cracked. He was on the verge of exploding. "RY-? Don't misunderstand." Rin waved his right hand while extending his left hand toward the prince and piercing right through his chest area with it. "Sperta. Why, you." He pulled his hand back to reveal a dark orb underneath the black blood that had been oozing all over it. "What I need is this." Brutus's brows furrowed. "Demon core." "Yes." Rin nodded his head, staring at the city in the distance. "I will explain it to you later, but I promised a certain someone something, and the price is this core. You can even say that you owe them as well." "Owe them?" "Yes." Rin nodded his head and pointed at the orc army in the distance. "The one I'm giving the core to was a massive help over the years in helping them develop to where they are now. You can say that the only reason they were even able to pose a threat to the demons was because of their influence." Brutus didn't say anything and just stared at the orb in Ren's hand, but his brows soon relaxed and he lowered his axe. Taking one last look at Ren, he turned around and moved toward the battlefield in the distance. "Do as you wish." Those were the last words he said before he disappeared into the distance. Staring at his fading back, I sighed and pocketed the core into my dimensional space. Well, that's that. It's good that it ended on a good note. I had feared he'd reject me, but thankfully he didn't. I wasn't sure what I'd have done had he done so. Chapter 790 Amora's Might 4. Kuzma City was once thought to be impregnable. Its towering walls were fortified with powerful wards and guarded by legions of fierce demons. But all of that changed when the orcs launched their surprise attack. At first, the demons were caught off guard. They had grown complacent in their belief that their city was invincible and started to grow careless when they saw the situation turn in their favor. They thought victory was within their grasp when, all of a sudden, an army of orcs appeared from out of nowhere, carrying heavy artillery with them. That was when the situation started to turn. As the orcs surged forward, their war cries echoing through the streets, the demons quickly rallied to defend their walls. As soon as the orcs made their initial assault, the demon immediately began to cast spells and shoot arrows at them, using the full extent of their power. Boomy, boomy. Attack. Attack. But the orcs were not deterred. They charged forward, stepping on their fallen comrades' bodies with their weapons raised high, and crashed into the demon defenders. Plike, plike, plike. The battle was fierce and brutal. Demons and orcs clashed in the narrow streets, fighting tooth and nail for every inch of ground. The air was thick with the scent of blood and the sound of clashing steel. Despite their resistance, the demons were slowly being pushed back. The orcs were simply too numerous and their strength and ferocity were unmatched. The demons fought with all their might, but it soon became clear that they were fighting a losing battle. With most of their most powerful members outside of the city, what happened inside was nothing short of a slaughter, with Silag leading the charge and hacking at the demons with unmatchable might. Charge. Kill. Karam. Karam. The orcs roared their battle cry, charging forward with renewed vigor. The demons tried to hold their ground, but it was no use. They were outnumbered and outmatched. They fought with all their might, but it was a losing battle. Retreat. Go back. The demons understood that their only chance of survival was to flee and try to regroup. They started to retreat while engaging in a desperate rearguard action in an attempt to buy their troops some time so that they could organize themselves. They hoped that they would be able to turn the tide of the battle if they could just hold out long enough. But it was a futile effort. Attack. Don't give them any breathing space. The orcs were unrelenting in their assault, exerting all of their strength to further their advantage. They broke through the city's last lines of defense and charged straight into the downtown area of the city. Kill any demon that you see. Don't spare anyone. Silig's orders reverberated throughout the entire battlefield, and all the orcs responded in unison. Even those that belonged to Brutus' army. Although brief, Silig had won the hearts of most of the orcs present. His presence was unlike any other, and so was his strength. He was obviously much weaker than Brutus, but his commanding skills were on a level all their own, as evidenced by the fact that he was able to infiltrate and destroy the city in a relatively short amount of time. What was even more impressive was the blind belief that the orc army that came with him had. They would obediently comply with his instructions without skipping a beat, regardless of what he said. And it was because they worked together in such harmony that they were able to make such rapid and significant advancements. It earned the admiration of many of the orcs present. Approach the tower. Silig brandished his hefty sword and pointed in the direction of the massive tower that stood in the middle of the city. So long as we take over the tower, we will take over the city. He bellowed loudly, his voice reaching every corner of the city. Charge. Rumble. Rumble. Looks like the war is as good as over. After putting the core away, I moved closer to Brutus, who was standing on top of the city walls and observing the city below from his vantage point. The focus of his attention was currently on. It's probably Silig, I think. To ensure that I wasn't misinterpreting what I was seeing, I kept switching my gaze between him and the direction in which he was looking. Just as I was about to check for the fourth time, Brutus' mouth opened up. Who is he? Why have I never heard about someone like him before? The expression on his face at the moment revealed some signs of confusion, particularly around his large eyes, which were squinting. It appeared as though he was making an effort to jog his memory about whether or not they had seen Silig in the past. Don't bother, you have never met him before. I similarly turned my gaze to look at Silig. He had completely taken command of the entire army, and despite the fact that he was not the most powerful orc within the army, none of the orcs appeared to be resisting his orders. Rather, they seemed to be following them dutifully. The sight made me smile. He had grown a lot since the last time that I had seen him. It was always reassuring to see an ally grow stronger. The reason you've never met him before is because he doesn't come from Earth. I spoke, feeling a burning gaze on the right side of my cheek. Not from Earth. The look on Brutus' face changed and he revealed an expression of surprise. As I look at him, I can't help but nod my head. There was no point in hiding it anyway. Yeah, so are the other orcs that have come with him. They are all not from Earth. If Brutus's expression previously was that of mild surprise, his expression at the moment was filled with shock. I wanted to laugh at this moment, but I managed to hold myself back. Feeling the intensity of this gaze deepen, I explained to him. They come from a planet called Amora. I hadn't known Brutus for a long time, but from the brief interactions I had with him, he was the type of orc that never showed changes in his expressions, and yet, today at this moment I was seeing all sorts of expressions from him. It was mildly amusing, yet at the same time I understood where he came from. How is this possible? His words were accompanied by a slight shaking of the mouth, and his eyes moved back to the orcs, who were creeping closer and closer to the city in the distance. It's because of me. I decided to tell him the truth. There was no longer any reason for me to keep it a secret, and I also believed that telling him would be for the best. You? Yeah. I nodded my head. I have recently learned a skill that enables me to open portals to other planets. It costs quite a bit to use, several SS-ranked cores, but it allows me to open the portals and have people come out of them. The effort it took Brutus to breathe became noticeable. I was on the verge of losing it at this very moment, but I managed to keep it together. I know. Don't worry. I turned toward him and patted him on the shoulder. After this is over, I'll allow you to come with me to Amora. I think you'll quite like the environment there. If there was one thing that this war enabled me to understand, it was that the orcs were not meant to stay on Earth. They were not able to make use of the sudden influx of mana to their advantage, in contrast to the dwarves and elves who thrived off of mana. It was exactly like the demons, and it dawned on me that their powers had been regressing because of it. Before I came here, I gave the situation some thought, and after some deliberation I settled on the conclusion that all of the orcs should be brought to Amora. Since they were my allies, I needed to take care of them properly. With the imminent third cataclysm, I needed everyone to be at their best. I couldn't afford to have the orcs become dead weight. The battle wasn't just between me and Jezebeth. It was also between the four races and the demons. I couldn't do this alone and needed help. Therefore, I needed to ensure that they were strong enough to go up against what was coming. Whew! Then the blaring sound of a horn filled the air and I turned my head. When I looked in the direction the sound was coming from and saw that Scylla was the one blowing the horn, I smiled and turned to face Brutus. Seems like the war is over. Chapter 791, The New Amora 1. Demon Domain, Ramlot City. As the elves and the demon army fought each other, the air was thick with the stench of brimstone, and the sound of steel clashing filled the atmosphere. Clank, clank. The smoke from the burning buildings obscured the view of the night sky above Ramlot City, and the cries of the injured could be heard echoing through the city streets. The elves had been driven to the outskirts of the city, and their numbers were continuing to decrease with each hour that passed. But they held on. The demons were on their last remaining leg and were merely holding on at the moment. The war had been raging on for a while now, and the elves had dominated throughout. They were able to break through the barrier that was protecting the city using the power of their spells and the sharpness of their arrows, which allowed them to kill the demons that were hiding behind the barrier. Shoo. It was a situation that the demons hadn't anticipated, and as a result, they were forced to come out and face the elven forces head-on. Attack. Don't let those bastard Ayok. Unfortunately for them, it turned out to be a cunningly planned ambush by the elves, who hid themselves behind the dead trees and meticulously dismantled their army. Go. Don't care about them. Charge forward. The circumstances had deteriorated to such a point that the demons had no choice but to launch an all-out assault and square off against the elven forces outside of the protection of their own city walls. Keep shooting. Maintain your distance from them. Shoo. That was exactly what the elves had been hoping for the entire time, so they dispatched a small group of their elite forces into the city while they defended the outside of the city from a distance. While it was true that they suffered a lot of casualties due to the large number of demons that emerged from the city, it wasn't something that they couldn't handle. They kept luring the demons away from the city, thereby killing them one by one and dwindling their numbers. Regroup. Get into formation. Once they were a fair distance away from the demon city, all semblance of order fell apart in the demon army and chaos ensued. Swoosh. The elves took advantage of the situation and attacked with even more ferocity than they had done before, and the demon army started to dwindle at a faster rate. It was slowly turning into a massacre as the land dyed black in their blood. It looks like the war will be over soon. Malin mumbled something as she surveyed the entire battleground from her vantage point high above. Her eyes were as unmoving as a well, and she held a demon core in the palm of her hand. It belonged to the prince-ranked demon that was in the city. They had been at each other's throats from the moment the war began, and ultimately, it was she who emerged victorious from the conflict. It wasn't a walk in the park, but neither was it a particularly challenging fight. Her strength increased significantly as a direct result of the significant rise in mana levels in the atmosphere, which brought it back to the levels it had on her home planet. How is the situation with you? Mylan's response came after she heard a harsh voice in her ear. I'm almost done over here. How about you? We're almost done on our side as well. What about you, Brutus? Gervis's question was met with silence and Malin frowned. Did something happen? What they were currently communicating with was a device that came directly from the dwarves and allowed them to communicate with each other wherever they were. Unlike a communication device, it didn't need to be taken out to speak and one only had to think to speak through it. It wasn't intrusive, and so the fact that there was no response made Malin and Gervis think that something had gone wrong. However, these concerns did not last for very long, as they were soon relieved to hear a familiar voice ringing in their heads. Sorry about that. Everything's good. I took over Plintus a while back, but I had to go over to help Brutus. The situation has just calmed down, so we are all good now. Help out Brutus. Malin seemed rather surprised by Ren's words. That brute asked for help? She had known Brutus for a considerable amount of time, and she was also very knowledgeable about the orcs. They were a very proud race, and as a result, they were not the kind of people to ask for assistance unless the situation called for it. The fact that they asked for assistance must have been a sign that the circumstances they were in were extremely precarious. Thankfully, it appeared from what Ren had said that the situation had been resolved, and there were no longer any issues. She sighed in relief. Do you need any help? We're almost done on our side too, and so if you It's alright, thank you. We're done here too. There's no need to send help. You're done. Malin was legitimately surprised by Ren's words. Didn't he just say that he had taken over Plinta City? How did he have the time to take over 2 cities? It was already hard enough for them to take over the city they were in, and yet he was telling them he had conquered 2? Was Brutus's situation not as bad as he made it out to be? I'll explain it to you guys later. I have to go now. Contact me once you're done taking over your city. I have some things I need to handle with Brutus. Come to these sets of coordinates once you're done. You'll know then. The communication turned off shortly after that, leaving Malin standing there speechless. This boy. Malin firmed her mind at that moment. She was going to have a nice talk with Natasha. It looks like the situation is good on their side. I informed Brutus of the news, and he responded with an unruffled nod of his head. He then pointed at his own head. I know I can hear. Oh right. I smiled and didn't say anything else. We all had the same communication device, so he heard everything. Sensing something, my gaze fell in a certain direction. There I spotted a familiar orc making his way toward me. My lord. Thump. Silig knelt on one knee in front of me. Following his example, another orc knelt down on one knee, and before I knew it, a wave of orcs knelt down right before me. Thump. 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 Not all of the orcs kneeled, with the orcs that belonged to Brutus' army appearing to be confused by their actions. Ignoring them, the edges of my lips began to quiver as I stared at the swarm of orcs kneeling in front of me. I could feel Brutus's stinging gaze from beside me, and my mouth twitched once more. What are you doing? Paying my respect. Silig answered as if it were the most obvious of answers. The only reason we are even alive today is because of you. It is only right that we follow your lead. Silig paused. Or is it that you don't want us? Staring at Silig, I rolled my eyes. He was currently staring at me with puppy eyes and looked like a puppy that had just lost its owner. The scene was pretty funny, but I just couldn't bring myself to laugh in light of the circumstances at hand. Where was the fierce orc leader that was commanding the entire army moments prior? Where did he go? Don't look at me like that. I let out a sigh. If I didn't need you guys, I wouldn't have called for your help over here, would I? I had invested so much into Amora. There was no way that I could ever give up on them like that. What I saw today was a testament to my investment, and although in the past I had some reservations about keeping them for the long term, after seeing what I saw today, it was impossible for me to part with them. They were simply far too useful for me to give up on. Oh. After hearing my words, Silig's demeanor immediately shifted, and a gleam appeared in his eyes. Or at least that was what I thought I saw. Thank you so much for your grace. Thank you so much for your grace. Thank you so much for your grace. The orcs behind him repeated out loud, and I turned my head away from them. This was too much. All right, let's not dwell on this matter anymore. I quickly tried to shift the topic away from the current situation and looked at the city. Seeing that there were no more demons left and that it was completely empty at the moment, I commanded. Plunder everything that is in the city as quickly as you can. Take care not to forget anything, and then turn back in the direction from which you came. You should bring the rest of the orcs with you. They'll be coming back with you to Amora, so it's important you get along well. Roar. After hearing my words, the orcs applauded very loudly, and I turned to look at Brutus. Follow me, it's time I show you your new home. Chapter 792, The New Amora 2. I knew that whatever lay ahead would be a stark contrast to how I had left it back then. But nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to witness. Holy fuck. The words escaped my lips before I could even think to stop them. I couldn't think of anything to say, so I turned to look at Brutus, who was standing next to me, and noticed that he had the same expression as I had. Or at least thought I had. What is this? He asked, his voice filled with what could only be described as shock. Knowing that I wasn't the only one feeling this sense of shock, I grinned. It's nice to know that I'm not shocked just because I'm biased. I pressed my hand against his shoulder and took in the view in front of me. This, my friend, is Amora. While muttering those words, my breath caught in my throat and my heart started racing. Although I had just recently communicated with Silig and had even made the others go to Amora, I never actually went there myself. I hadn't stepped foot in the place yet. This was the first time in a very long time that I had visited this place, and the sheer magnitude of everything that was in front of me was so overwhelming that I could not help but stare in disbelief. The barrier looked sturdy as well. A shimmering energy barrier that radiated an otherworldly hue encircled the city. When I reached out with my hand to touch it, a faint ripple spread throughout. It can definitely hold out well against a duke rank. I wasn't too sure about prince rank. I had to test it. Still, what's more impressive is the city. The towering skyscrapers that stood at the heart of Amora were sleek and shiny, their surfaces reflecting the neon lights that illuminated the streets below. But it wasn't just the buildings that caught my eye. The streets were bustling with activity, with orcs, elves, and dwarves all going about their business. I watched in amazement as they moved about their day, their lives intertwined in a way that I had never seen before. And then there were the trees. My God! They encircled some of the buildings and some were just as tall as the skyscrapers themselves. Their leaves rustled gently in the breeze and I couldn't help but marvel at the sight. Further into the city, the buildings became taller and more imposing, their architecture a testament to the ingenuity of the city's engineers and designers. This really the same place? I couldn't help but marvel at the sheer scale of it all. But it wasn't just the buildings that impressed me. The most striking feature of the city was the imposing city walls that encircled it. Made of reinforced steel and towering high into the sky, the walls were rather imposing. This is definitely a nice improvement over what they were before. I couldn't help but feel a sense of security as I gazed up at them, knowing that they were protecting the city from any potential threats. And then, as if to further solidify the fact that this was no longer the same Amora of my memories, I felt it. Mana. It was thin, but it was there. Layers of it lingered in the air and I could feel its power coursing through me. And then, as if that wasn't enough, I caught sight of several scions floating in the air above me. They actually did it. I muttered to myself in awe of what I was witnessing. A while back, Jomnuk told me that the elves knew of a way to create mana. I hadn't put much thought into it at the time, but now I realized just how significant this was. The fact that they had managed to create a city that was alive with mana was beyond what I had expected, and it filled me with a sense of wonder. It's still on the thin side, but it's here. I whispered to myself, unable to tear my gaze away from the city before me. For a moment I was lost in my thoughts, my mind racing with all of the possibilities that this city held. And then, as if to snap me out of my reverie, I heard the soft flap of a pair of wings. Why, you're finally here. Suriel. When I turned my gaze, my eyes paused on a familiar demon and my eyes opened up a bit. As soon as I looked at the demon in front of me, the shock that I had previously felt from the city vanished almost instantly. The state in which he was in. It wasn't good. He appeared to be very shriveled, and even standing in front of me appeared to be a challenge for him. When I looked at him, a variety of conflicting feelings flooded over me and I decided to approach him. It looks like you've had it rough. He gave me a sour smile but didn't say a word. It seemed like speaking was too much of a hurdle for him in his present state. He eyed me with some trepidation. Have you? Don't worry. I patted him on the shoulder and looked at the city. You've done a good job. It's right that you get what I promised you. Here. When I removed the core that belonged to Prince Kuzma, Suriel's expression changed immediately and became more upbeat. Thank you. He took the core from my hand and hastily brought it to his mouth. A change took place almost instantaneously, and the atmosphere all around us became thick with demonic energy. It didn't take long for Suriel's emaciated body to start making a full recovery, and his eyes, which only a few moments ago appeared to be cloudy, made a speedy recovery. During the time that this was going on, I whirled around to face Brutus. His eyes flashed me an expression of sudden comprehension, and he nodded his head in my direction. I nodded back. It looks like there won't be any problems. Good. Ha ha ha. A boisterous and cheerful laugh brought me back, and when I turned my head, I witnessed Suriel jumping up and down with joy, laughing like a maniac. It was a sight that made it difficult for me to find the right words to describe it. and even Brutus was rendered speechless by his behavior. But the demon in question didn't seem to care as he flapped his wings and flew into the air. Swoosh! His speed was extremely fast, and not only did he seem to be a lot faster than the last time that I fought him, but it also seemed as though his strength had undergone a significant transformation. Oh, congratulations on your breakthrough. I broke into a grin as soon as I realized what had taken place, and Suriel materialized in front of me not long after. His demeanor as a whole had altered, but the sparkle in his eyes was just as strong as before. Thank you, Skaze. He almost seemed touched at the moment, and I found that rather amusing to see. For a very long time I've been attempting to work my way up to the prince rank. I tried all sorts of methods to get there, but none of them were successful. Duke, no, Prince Suriel stared right at me as he continued. I had almost given up hope when I was brought to this planet to look out over it, but who could have predicted that I would eventually be able to get there after nearly dying? What can I say? The diligent get rewarded. Just before I sent Silig and his army to Earth, I had a conversation with him, and during that conversation he informed me of all of the contributions that Suriel had made. He detailed to me how Suriel had taken charge of the administrative matters of the city and handled everything to the greatest possible extent. Who would have thought it was by this much? Initially, I didn't give it much thought and just wanted to thank him for his hard work, but after I saw the condition of the city, I realized that the reward I had given him was probably not enough after what he had done to the city. I was honestly extremely pleased with the result. I'm very pleased with your work. Keep up the good work and I'll think of giving you another reward. I flashed Prince Plintus's core at him and Suriel's expression hardened. You have another one? I smiled at him. Just do as you're told. Oh, okay. Silig nodded with a stiff face. Good. I didn't just flash him the core for the sake of making him work harder. It was also a warning to him. A warning that prince-ranked demons were not something that I couldn't handle anymore. I believed he was going to be faithful to me, but several events that transpired in my life taught me not to put too much faith in anyone besides a select few. Finny. Ah, right. Suriel pounded his closed fist against the surface of his open palm as if suddenly recalling something important. What is it? I asked, curious about his sudden behavior. Looking at me, Suriel's wings expanded. Wait here for a moment. I've got something to report. Swoosh. His figure disappeared from where he was standing and the area around me turned quiet. Staring in the direction of where he was headed, I turned around to look at Brutus. So, what do you think? About the demon? No, the city. It's good. Brutus spoke quietly after a short pause. Although he had a neutral expression on his face, I could tell from the sparkle in his eyes that he found the city to be more enjoyable than he was letting on. I couldn't help but grin at that, and my lips were just about to move when Suriel made his way back into view. I'm back. When I turned my head, I was shocked to see him holding a demon in his hands. Suriel brought him forward. I caught him snooping a while back and was wondering about what we should do with him. As I did not know what to do with him in your absence, I kept him alive, but now that you are present, I await your instructions. Chapter 793, The New Amora 3. Where are we going? I'm not sure. I'm just following the coordinates that Rin sent me. Ryan muttered something under his breath as he stared at his watch and double-checked to make sure he was heading in the right direction. Behind him were all of the forces that belonged to the human domain, and they were all following him stealthily while wearing simple smiles on their faces. It was obvious that they were pleased with how the war had turned out for them, having suffered relatively few casualties. Did Rin send you the coordinates to the portal? Yup. Ryan responded, casting Ava a fleeting glance before returning his attention to the watch on his wrist. His footsteps picked up their pace as he realized that he was only a few kilometers away from the spot indicated on the watch. As he moved ahead, his eyes took on a certain glint as they looked ahead. It wasn't just him. Everyone had the same look in their eyes as they followed him from behind. Everyone couldn't wait to go back to Amora. The fact that they were getting ready to go to war prevented any of them from being able to carefully admire the city, but in the brief time that they were able to stay there, they were awestruck by the splendor of the city. Even though the amount of mana over there was much lower than in Ashton City, the city was a lot cleaner and better put together when compared to Ashton City. We've arrived. Ryan's body came to a startling halt all of a sudden, and as soon as he raised his head to look around, his mind blanked. What's going on? He wasn't the only one that reacted like that, as everyone looked in the distance in what seemed to be shock. Rumble. Rumble. Orcs in the tens of thousands, perhaps even hundreds of thousands, stood in front of a portal that was about the size of a small house. Their presence was dreadful, and the pressure that was exerted was unlike anything that any of them had ever experienced before. At the head of the orcs stood a white orc with a large scar running down his face. Upon detecting their approach, he turned his head and approached them. "Silig," Ryan called out in a leisurely manner. "Little human." Ryan's expression could not help but freeze for a moment when Silig greeted him. Thankfully, he recovered quickly. This was not the first time he had referred to him in this manner. That being said, he wasn't pleased with the nickname that he had given him. He wasn't little anymore. "You're lucky that I have a lot of patience." Threatening him inside of his mind, Ryan opened his mouth to ask, "What are you guys doing over here?" "My lord has called for us." "My lord? You mean Ren?" "Yes." Silig nodded his head in agreement, and Ryan's expression changed. He came to a sudden realization. "So that's why he didn't call for us." "I see, he must have called you to handle the orc problem." "Yes." Silig nodded once again, and Ryan massaged the bottom of his chin. He appeared to be considering something as he cast his gaze over the distant portal. "Since that's done, what are you waiting here for?" "The Lord has told us to wait for certain guests." "Gyuh. Sush." Before he could even finish his sentence, the surrounding trees began to rustle, and figures emerged from behind them. Their steps were light, and their silver hair perfectly reflected the moonlight that illuminated the night sky. It was the elves. Creak, creak. If that wasn't enough, soon afterward, mechanical sounds began to ring throughout the vast plot of land, and figures wearing bulky armor and artifacts began to appear from above the skies and gently land on the ground below them. In a matter of seconds, the land became filled with more and more dwarves, and within a short minute of Ryan's words, the land was completely filled with those from the tree races. Ryan's mouth hung open at that moment. "Don't tell me he plans on bringing everyone over to Amora." "How did you know?" Ryan closed his mouth and his head throbbed. "Just what was Ren planning?" They're a lot quicker than I anticipated." Thump. As I pulled my hand away from a certain demon's head, its body collapsed in front of my very eyes. When I turned around, I was greeted by the sight of Suriel standing outside the room, where he had been waiting for me. "Have you found anything out?" "Yes." I gave a satisfied nod while gently stroking the top of my chin and pondering over the new information that I had received through the demon's memories. "It looks like the demons have noticed that something is amiss with Amora and were asked to investigate the matter." For now, he was the only demon that made a move, but from the memories, the demon seems to think that there will soon be more demons coming over to the planet. That wasn't good news. If Jezebeth were to come to learn of what I was doing in Amora, everything would go up in flames. I think I don't have to worry too much, though. The most recent information I had indicated that the demons were currently engaged in a war with the three primary forces representing the other races. Because Jezebeth was most likely fighting against the protectors, he most likely did not have time to check on how things were progressing on my side. In fact, by the time the conflict was resolved over there, he would probably just shift his attention directly to Earth. When I realized that there was nothing significant to be concerned about, the tension in my brows finally began to ease. "Yeah, there's nothing to worry about," I reassured myself. Whoom. Right at that moment, the barrier of the city began to wobble, and a number of terrifying presences began to make their way into the city. Never mind. At first I was taken aback, but as I sensed more carefully, I realized that the presence belonged to some people that I was already familiar with, and as a result I was able to relax. I looked at Suriel. "Let's go greet our guests." There was a momentary change in Malin's expression. The moment her eyes landed on the city that lay in front of her, she found herself overcome with emotion. The city was a mix of different architectural designs. From Orson architecture to human architecture, dwarven architecture and elven architecture, it had all of them, and they seamlessly blended together to create the city that was before them. It was nothing short of beautiful, and even Gervas seemed to be impressed by the city in front of their eyes. I heard from Rander and Jomnuk that they were working on a large project, but I didn't think it was something of this caliber. I'm honestly baffled. Emichum. Malin nodded her head in agreement. She too was extremely impressed by what she was seeing. Since Rin had asked for her assistance quite some time ago, and she had dispatched a number of elves to assist with the project, she had previously believed that she knew a little bit about this place. However, she had never imagined that the city would be of this scale and that it would be so well organized. What do you guys think? Their ears picked up a familiar voice, and then a figure appeared in front of them. He regarded them with interest while wearing a sloppy grin. Her. Rin was forced to retreat in fear as Gervis immediately pounced on him in an attempt to hug him, and he covered the front half of his body as he did so. There was visible fear in his eyes as he looked at Gervis. More specifically, his head, which was level with a certain part of his body. "Ah, no." He extended one of his hands forward. "Do not even bother trying. You're about half as tall as I am. Are you trying to prevent me from starting a family?" Gervis froze on the spot and his beard trembled. Understanding the meaning of Ren's words, he pointed his thick fingers at Ren while his face went through a series of different expressions. "Why? Is this how you greet your ally?" He was practically yelling, which drew the attention of everyone who was following closely behind them. "Watch yourself." It was only after Malin's reminder that he came to, and he raised his fist to cough. "Puff. I accidentally turned on my speaker. If you'll excuse me." Everyone behind him quickly turned their heads away from him as he cast an inconspicuous glare in their direction. He nodded his head in satisfaction when he saw them cower under his gaze. My bad. Be it Rain or Malin, the two were at a loss for words. The first one to recover was Ren, who took a step back and moved his hands away from his groin. "All right, enough with the jokes." The smile returned to his face and he nudged them with his head. "Come, let's go. I'll bring you guys over to the city. I'm sure we have a lot to discuss at the moment." He turned around and headed toward the city. Malin and Gervis exchanged glances for a split second while staring at the back of his head. After that, they nodded their heads and began to follow him from behind. Yes. Chapter 794, The New Amora 4. "So, what do you think?" I asked while keeping an eye on Malin, Gervis, and Brutus. Inside the main headquarters, which was located in the middle of the city, we were currently seated in front of a large wooden table. The room was fairly large and there was a pleasant breeze that continued to blow throughout it. I felt rather comfortable here. "What do you want us to say?" Malin's expression was one of bitterness as she looked at me, moving her hair behind her ear as she leaned back in her chair before eventually smiling. "I'm not going to lie, it's great." She paused as if that wasn't enough. "It's beyond impressive." "I'm glad you think so." I felt my ego go up at that moment. It took a long breath for me to suppress my rising ego, and my expression turned serious. "Enough about the city. I'm actually here to talk about something serious." Hearing the solemnity in my tone, the atmosphere in the room immediately shifted, and the three of them sat up straight. Seeing that I now had their full attention, I started to speak. "First things first, you should all be aware of what's currently happening outside of this planet, right?" The expressions of the three turned grim at my words. "How could we not know? We've already been briefed by the other forces. The situation is quite dire for them." Malin commented, her expression beyond serious. When I turned my head to look at the others, I noticed that they all wore the same expression on their faces, and that's when I realized that their forces weren't doing any better than hers. Gervis started. "Don't think they'll last any longer than a couple more days." His words increased the tension within the room and my expression changed in response. Although I somewhat expected this situation to occur, it transpired much more quickly than I anticipated. I took a deep breath. This is much worse than I expected. If the forces were only able to hold out for a couple of days, then it just goes to show how powerful the demons really were. Although I was certain that the demons had suffered losses in this war, they were still a major force at the moment, and the situation was rather grim. It also looks like Jezebeth has won against the protectors. The very thought of it made my heart race. I had already fought against one and I could hardly keep up with them in the fight that followed. It was the other me who ultimately killed him, and the thought that Jezebeth was able to get rid of 6 of them made my heart shudder. It appeared as though the distance between the two of us, which I had thought was getting smaller, had all of a sudden become even greater. Shit. Unable to hold back, I let out a soft curse. As I continued to mull over the various opportunities, I took a deep breath and raised my head to look at the others in the room. I'll be frank. I shared what I concluded. According to what we can tell from the current state of affairs, the third cataclysm will fall upon Earth in at most 6 months. That's if they're being generous to us. At the very least, 1 year of Earth time would be all the demon army needed to recover from the war fully. Since the time difference between Earth and the planet where the war is taking place is only 1:2, then it's safe to assume they will be here within half a year. By the time they fully recovered, Jezebeth would unquestionably open a portal and dispatch his armies to the surface of the Earth. When that happened, what should we do? At this point, the others realized how dire the situation was, and their expressions deteriorated. Thankfully, none of them lost their cool and everyone was able to maintain their composure. I pondered for a moment before finally proposing. It's not like the situation is completely out of hand. Everyone's gaze fell on me. Before they could even voice out their opinions, I continued. You've seen this place. You've seen Imora, and you should know that the time here flows 10 times faster than that of Earth. Everyone's mouth came to a stop. I continued. The city, it's not exactly the biggest of sizes, but it's large enough to sustain all 4 races. I had planned all of this beforehand. In preparation for a potential migration, I tasked the dwarves with designing skyscrapers that would be capable of housing tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of people. In addition to that, I had constructed a place underground where people could go to seek refuge. Even though I wasn't exactly sure how many people could stay in this place, I did know for a fact that it would be good enough to hold all 4 races. What remained of the humans and other races on Earth was just about enough to fill the city. Since the overall population of Earth shrunk so much, unlike the billions in the past, it's safe to assume that the city is big enough to hold everyone in. I'm glad I planned in advance. Even though the city is still in its infant stages, I believe that it is almost ready to allow people to move in. There is a possibility that it will become quite crowded, but it shouldn't be too much of a problem. I turned to look at Malin. Also, if we use all of the resources we have, it isn't impossible to replicate the environment that we have on Earth. It was no longer necessary to hoard resources, given the impending arrival of the third cataclysm. If there was ever a time when we were required to make use of them, that time had to be right now. If we put all of the cores that we've gathered to use, I have no doubt that we'll be able to bring the total amount of mana in this city up to 4 times what it is right now. In fact, it's entirely possible that we can have the mana density within the city match that of Earth. I alternated my gaze between Gervas and Brutus. But that's not all. In this world, a half year is equivalent to about 5 years, so we can use this time to upgrade the artifacts and equipment that all of our armies have at their disposal. Moreover, we can also make the most of this opportunity by learning how to cooperate with one another. Even though I wasn't present during the war between the demons and the 3 races in Idoania, I was still able to say with absolute certainty that the 3 races, had they been cooperating more closely with one another, wouldn't have been pushed as much as they had been now. They would have been able to significantly increase their power and possibly hold out for even longer had they been able to figure out how to consolidate their armies and coordinate with each other in a way that would make their attacks more efficient by working on the strengths and weaknesses of each race. It is absolutely necessary for us to make the most of the remaining time we have in order to gain as much strength as we possibly can. I leaned my body forward on the table. I understand that it will be difficult for you guys to give up all of the resources that you have hoarded for yourselves, but at this point, there is no longer a need to be concerned about the future. There will be no future if you keep the situation as is. Laying out everything that I had been thinking for a while, I was practically out of breath. This plan of yours. Malin began speaking. She appeared to be in deep thought and her gaze landed on me. What about the humans? Will they also come here? Yes. I readily nodded my head. I haven't told them yet and they probably won't be happy with the decision, but it has to be done. Earth, as much as it was our home planet, had to be evacuated. Sending them to Imora was the only way to save as many lives as possible in light of the impending third cataclysm. And considering how dangerous it was for them to be there at the moment, it was the only option available. I won't be forcing those who don't want to go though. I made it a point to emphasize the very last point. Even though I had a genuine concern for the people, I was prepared to grant their wish to stay on Earth if it was in their best interest to stay there. It was their choice and I wasn't going to force anyone. Once more there was complete silence in the room. Everyone had entered a state of profound reflection, and the only sound that could be heard was the sound of their own breathing. I've said what I wanted to say, so I guess it's up to them. There was nothing else that I needed to say, and I was simply waiting for their answer. I didn't have to wait for very long for their answer, as the three of them turned their heads to face me after looking at each other, apparently coming to a decision together. Their mouths soon parted open and they mouthed their decision to me.